Matthew was in his office reviewing the last reports of the day when a sharp pain shot through his chest. The world around him darkened, sounds faded, and everything became a chaos of shadows. He woke up in a hospital bed, the blinding white lights and the constant beeping of the machines welcoming him back to reality. A doctor appeared beside him, his face serious but compassionate. "How are you feeling, Matthew?" he asked softly. Matthew tried to sit up, but the pain made him give up. "What happened? Why am I here?" The doctor consulted his chart, sighing before speaking. "You had a serious episode. We need to run some more tests, but the early signs are not good." Matthew remained silent, his mind racing with questions and fears. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the doctor returned. "Matthew, I have to be honest with you. The results show that you have a terminal illness. At best, you have about 12 months to live." Time seemed to stand still. The doctor's words echoed in his head, each one heavier than the last. His heart was pounding, as if trying to reject the reality that was presented to him. 12 months, he whispered, disbelief and fear mingling in his voice. "I'm so sorry, Matthew," the doctor said, his voice grave but understanding. "We are going to do everything we can to make you comfortable, but it's important that you use this time to do what really matters to you." Matthew left the hospital in a daze, the bustle of Madrid around him seeming distant, as if he were watching someone else's life through a screen. He walked aimlessly, passing through the busy streets, the sounds and smells of the city barely registering in his mind. He stopped in front of a window, his reflection pale and dejected in the glass, the cityscape of Madrid blurred and lifeless behind him. Finally, he took a train to his home, a small, quiet town on the outskirts of Madrid. The journey was a blur, the faces of the passengers and the stations passing by without him really seeing them. Arriving at his house, Natalia was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune as she prepared dinner. Matthew entered the kitchen, his face pale and his posture slumped. Natalia turned to him, worry etched on every line of her face. "What's wrong, Matthew?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He said nothing at first. He just took her hand and led her into the living room. They sat down together on the sofa, and he finally broke the silence. "I went to the doctor today," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "They told me I have 12 months to live." The words hung in the air, heavy and full of pain. Natalia looked at him, her eyes welling up with tears. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice breaking. Matthew hugged her, feeling the warmth of her body against his, a small anchor in a sea of uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice laden with despair and fear. "I don't know." Dinner was silent, only the soft clinking of cutlery against plates breaking the tense air. Matthew watched Natalia, her face reflecting the inner struggle she had been hiding. "Natalia," he began, his voice low and measured, "I've been thinking a lot. About us. About the future." She looked up, uncertainty shining in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I want to have a child," Matthew said, his words falling like a stone in still water. Natalia's fork fell from her plate with a clatter. The room was filled with a palpable tension. "But you heard the doctor," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You won't be here to see him grow up." Matthew nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I know, but it's the only thing I want before I go. I want to leave something meaningful, something that will last." Natalia looked away, her hands shaking slightly. "I don't know if I can do it, Matthew. Raising a child without you, I don't know if I'm strong enough." The silence lengthened, broken only by the sound of utensils being carefully placed on the table. Matthew reached out, gently touching hers. "It's a difficult decision, I know, but I feel like it's the only thing I have left." Natalia got up from the table, her face a mixture of sadness and determination. "I need time to think," she said, and retreated to the bedroom. That night, Matthew lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He knew that time was not on his side, and each passing day was one less day to make his mark on the world. The next morning, the sound of a zipper breaking the silence woke him up. Matthew got up quickly and found Natalia packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "I can't do it, Matthew," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I can't watch you die, and I can't raise a child alone. I'm sorry." The sound of the zipper closing was like a final blow. Matthew stood at the door, watching as Natalia left the house, her figure slowly disappearing. The front door closed with a finality that echoed throughout the empty house. Matthew slumped onto the sofa, the weight of loneliness falling upon him. The walls of the house, once a haven of love and laughter, now felt cold and empty. The clock on the wall kept ticking, each tick a reminder of his condition. Days later, Matthew arrived early at their usual cafe in Madrid. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the familiar sounds of clinking cups filled the air. He chose a table in the corner where he and Pablo used to sit. He watched the passers-by, his mind in a whirlwind of dark thoughts. Pablo arrived shortly after, his expression reflecting concern when he saw Matthew. He sat down opposite him and offered a comforting smile. "Matthew, how are you doing?" Matthew took a sip of his coffee, searching for the right words. "I've been better, Pablo. The truth is, I don't know what to do. Everything I had planned has fallen apart." Pablo nodded, listening intently. "I know, friend. Life can be unfair. What are you thinking of doing now?" "That's what I don't know," replied Matthew, letting out a sigh. "I feel lost. I wanted to leave something meaningful, but it seems like everything is useless." Pablo leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "Matthew, have you thought about adoption?" Matthew looked up, surprised. "I hadn't considered it. In my condition, I don't know if it would be fair to the child." Pablo took a business card out of his wallet and slid it across the table. "I know a place in Toledo. The adoption agency is very understanding. You could give a child a loving home, even if for a short time." Matthew took the card, his fingers brushing against the worn edges. He felt the weight of Pablo's suggestion, like a rope thrown out in the middle of his storm. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Pablo." Pablo held his gaze steady, his voice soft but firm. "This could be your chance to make a difference, Matthew. Not just for the child, but for you as well." Matthew kept the card in his pocket, feeling a flicker of hope mixed with fear. "Thank you, Pablo. I'll think about it seriously." The rest of the conversation drifted toward shared memories and anecdotes from the past, but the seed of the idea was already planted in Matthew's mind. That night, in the solitude of his home, Matthew took out the card and studied it under the dim light. The words Toledo Adoption Agency seemed to shine with a silent promise. The next day, Matthew called the agency. The voice on the other end of the line was kind and professional. They made an appointment for the following week. As each day passed, Matthew felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. He knew that time was not on his side, but he also felt that this might be his last chance to make a meaningful mark. On the day of the appointment, Matthew drove to Toledo. The landscape changed from bustling Madrid to the peaceful fields and hills, offering a contrast that mirrored his emotional state. Upon entering the adoption agency, he was greeted by a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The walls were decorated with children's drawings, each telling a story of hope and love. A soft murmur of voices and children's laughter could be heard in the distance, creating a contrast to the emotional weight Matthew carried. Gina, the agency worker, greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome, Matthew. I'm Gina. Please, follow me to my office," she said, gesturing to a door at the end of the hallway. Matthew followed her, noticing the attention to detail in every corner of the place, from the comfortable furniture to the carefully organized toys. Once in the office, Gina invited him to sit down. "I've reviewed your case, and I want to thank you for being here today. I know it's not easy." Matthew nodded, his hands clasped in his lap. "Thank you for seeing me, Gina. I want to do something meaningful with the time I have left." Gina looked at him with understanding eyes. "Your story is very moving, Matthew. Here, we try to find the best home for each child, and we believe that you could be a light in the life of someone special." She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out a photograph. "This is Teresa," she said, handing him the picture. "She is 10 years old, and she's in a delicate situation. The doctors say that she has about 3 months left." Matthew took the photo, his eyes scanning the image of a girl with bright eyes and a brave smile. He felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of pain and determination. "I want to meet her," he said, his voice firm despite the emotion he felt. Gina nodded. "I understand. Teresa is a special girl. She's been through a lot, but she's still incredibly strong. I'm sure you'll appreciate meeting her." The next few days were an anxious wait. Matthew was preparing his house, making sure everything was ready to receive Teresa. Every little detail mattered, from choosing the colors for her room to the books he planned to read to her. Finally, the day arrived. Matthew returned to Toledo, this time with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He walked the halls, his heart pounding as he approached Teresa's room. Each step echoed in the silence, his mind filled with thoughts and expectations. Upon entering the room, Matthew saw Teresa, a frail figure in a bed that seemed too big for her. Soft light streamed in through the window, bathing the room in a warm glow. Teresa looked up, her bright, curious eyes focusing on the stranger who had just entered. "Hello, Teresa," Matthew said, his voice soft and calming. "Hello," she replied in a shy but firm tone, watching him intently. Matthew sat down in a chair beside the bed, trying to find the right words. "My name is Matthew. I've come to meet you. I've heard many good things about you." Teresa smiled slightly, still a little reserved. "Really? Who told you about me?" "Gina, from the adoption agency," Matthew replied. "She told me that you are very brave and that you really like to read." Teresa's eyes lit up. "Yes, I love to read. It's like traveling to other worlds without leaving bed." Matthew nodded, feeling an immediate connection. "I like to read too." "What is your favorite book?" Teresa thought for a moment before answering. "I like adventure stories, where the characters face challenges and find their courage." "Those are the best," agreed Matthew. "They remind me that even though things get tough, there is always hope." They spent the rest of the day talking and sharing stories. Matthew told her anecdotes from his youth, about his travels and adventures, and Teresa told him about her dreams and wishes. As the conversation progressed, Matthew realized Teresa's incredible strength and maturity, despite her young age. At one point in the afternoon, Matthew pulled a teddy bear out of his bag and handed it to Teresa. "This is for you. I hope it keeps you company." Teresa took the teddy bear with trembling hands, her face lit up by a genuine smile. "Thank you, Matthew. It is very pretty. I'm glad you like it, said Matthew, feeling a warmth in his heart. I want you to know that you are not alone. I'm here for you. Teresa looked at him intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and gratitude. Really? Really? Matthew affirmed with conviction. We're going to face this together, step by step. The afternoon passed quickly, and when it was time to leave, Matthew felt a lump in his throat. I'll see you again soon, Teresa. I promise you won't be alone in this. Teresa nodded, hugging the teddy bear tightly. I'll be waiting for you. As he drove home, Matthew reflected on the day. He had found a reason to go on, a purpose that gave meaning to his last months. Teresa was not just a girl who needed help. She was a light in his life, someone who reminded him of the importance of every moment, of every gesture of love and kindness. From that day on, Matthew dedicated his time and energy to being with Teresa, to supporting her every step of the way. And although he knew that time was limited, he also knew that each day together was a gift, an opportunity to create memories that would last beyond his own life. The wait had been long, but the day finally came. Gina, moved by Matthew's sincerity and commitment, approved the adoption. The smile on Matthew's face reflected a mixture of relief and joy. Thank you, Gina. I promise I will do everything possible to give Teresa a home full of love. Gina nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. I know, Matthew. I trust that you will do a wonderful job. Teresa is a special girl, and I know she will be in good hands with you. Back home, Matthew dedicated himself to preparing every detail for Teresa's arrival. He wanted his new home to be a haven of peace and joy for her. He painted the walls of her room with vibrant colors, hung pictures full of life, and placed a comfortable bed with a soft and cozy quilt. Each object, from toys to books, was chosen carefully, thinking about what might make Teresa smile. Finally, the day arrived. Teresa arrived at her new home, a mixture of excitement and apprehension reflected in her eyes. Matthew greeted her with a warm smile, extending his hand. Welcome, Teresa. This is your home now. Teresa looked around, her eyes filled with wonder and curiosity. It is very beautiful, Matthew. Thank you. I'm glad you like it, replied Matthew. Come on, let me show you your room. Teresa's room was lit by sunlight streaming through the window. The cheerful colors and carefully placed decorations gave it a feeling of warmth and welcome. Teresa walked slowly, carefully touching each object, as if to make sure everything was real. Do you like it? Asked Matthew, watching her carefully. Teresa nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. It's perfect. Thank you, Matthew. You're welcome, Teresa. This is your home, and I want you to feel comfortable here. That night, Matthew and Teresa cooked together for the first time. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of homemade food and the sound of laughter and conversation. Matthew taught Teresa how to prepare his favorite dish, and Teresa, with hands still a little clumsy but full of enthusiasm, followed each instruction carefully. Matthew, can I ask you something? Teresa said as she mixed the ingredients. Of course, Teresa. What do you want to know? Why did you decide to adopt me? She asked, her eyes searching Matthew's. Matthew paused for a moment, considering his answer. Because when I heard your story, I felt a connection with you. We are both facing difficult challenges, but I believe that together we can find strength and joy. I want to give you a home and love, and I believe that you can teach me a lot too. Teresa looked at him intently, her eyes filled with understanding. Thank you, Matthew. I never thought that someone like you would want to be my family. "I am lucky too, Teresa," Matthew said sincerely. "Having you here is a gift to me." They had dinner together. The food tasted better with the company. They talked about their days, their dreams, and what they hoped for the future. Despite the difficulties they both faced, hope and joy filled the house that night. Matthew felt grateful for every moment he spent with Teresa. He knew that time was limited, but he was determined to make every day count. Teresa, for her part, began to open up and confide in Matthew, finding in him not only a caregiver, but a true friend and protector. Matthew and Teresa got up early every morning, ready to make the most of each day together. The routine was simple but meaningful, built on small moments that both treasured. "Let's go to the park today," Matthew said one morning as they had breakfast together in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window, filling the room with warmth. Teresa smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. "Can we take the kite?" "Of course," Matthew replied, returning her smile. "It's a good day to fly kites." In the park, Teresa ran across the grass, laughing out loud as the kite soared through the air. Matthew watched her, feeling a mixture of joy and melancholy. Teresa's every laugh was a reminder of the value of these shared moments. In the evenings, they watched movies together, curled up on the sofa with a soft blanket. Teresa chose the movies, and Matthew marveled at her ability to find beauty and meaning in every story. "Matthew, I love this movie," Teresa whispered during a particularly moving scene. "It makes me feel hopeful." "It's a good choice, Teresa. You always know how to find the best ones," replied Matthew, gently stroking her hair. As time went by, Teresa's health began to decline. Good days alternated with difficult ones, but Matthew never lost hope. He cared for Teresa with unwavering dedication, holding her in moments of pain and offering her comfort with soft words and warm hugs. "Matthew, I feel very tired today," Teresa said one day, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, little one. I'm here with you," replied Matthew, taking her hand tenderly. "Rest a little. I'll be here when you wake up." Teresa closed her eyes, her breathing calm as she drifted off to sleep. Matthew watched over her, his heart filled with love and worry. He knew that their time together was limited. On the most difficult days, Matthew found ways to keep hope alive. He would read stories to Teresa, whispering the words in a calm and comforting voice. Teresa would smile weakly, her hand clutching Matthew's as she listened. "Thank you, Matthew. You are the best dad in the world," Teresa said one day, her voice barely audible but full of sincerity. "No, thank you, Teresa. You are the bravest girl I know," replied Matthew, his eyes filled with unshed tears. Every day, every little shared moment was a testament to the resilience and depth of their connection. Matthew was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when he heard the scream. He ran to Teresa's room and found her curled up in bed, her face pale and her breathing ragged. "Teresa, what's wrong?" Matthew asked, his voice thick with concern. "I can't breathe well," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Matthew didn't waste any time. He called an ambulance, and as they waited, he sat beside her, holding her hand. "Everything will be all right, Teresa. I'm here with you," he murmured, trying to calm the panic that was rising inside him. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics worked efficiently, stabilizing Teresa before taking her to the hospital. Matthew sat beside her in the ambulance, his eyes fixed on her, his hand gripping hers tightly. Upon arriving at the hospital, the sterile atmosphere and the smell of disinfectant made the environment feel cold and desolate. Teresa was immediately taken to the emergency room, and Matthew was left to wait outside, feeling a heartbreaking helplessness. Finally, a doctor came out to speak with him. Matthew, Teresa's condition is serious. We are doing everything we can, but she needs to stay here under observation. Matthew nodded, his face serious and determined. I want to be with her. I won't leave her alone. The doctor allowed him to enter, and Matthew approached Teresa's bedside. Her frail body was connected to various monitors, and the constant beeping of medical equipment filled the room. Matthew sat down next to her, taking her hand. I'm here, Teresa. Don't worry. The following days were a test of endurance for both Teresa and Matthew. He stayed by her side, reading her favorite books and telling her stories to keep her spirits up. His voice was an anchor in the midst of the storm, a constant source of strength and comfort. Matthew, will you read me another story? Teresa asked one day, her voice weak but hopeful. Of course, Teresa, Matthew replied, taking a book from the nightstand. Which one would you like to hear? The one about the brave girl who never gave up, she said with a faint smile. Matthew opened the book and began to read, his voice calm and steady. As he read, he felt that every word was a promise of hope and strength. Teresa closed her eyes, listening intently, her hand intertwined with Matthew's. Nights were the hardest. Matthew barely slept, worried about every change in Teresa's breathing, every beep of the monitor. Sometimes he would lean in and whisper words of encouragement. You are so strong, Teresa. I'm very proud of you. One night, Teresa woke up in the midst of a panic attack. Matthew, I'm scared, she said, her eyes filled with tears. Matthew leaned in and hugged her gently. I know, little one, but you're not alone. I'm here with you. We'll get through this together. Teresa slowly calmed down, her breathing returning to normal. Thank you, Matthew. I don't know what I would do without you. And me without you, Teresa, Matthew replied, his voice breaking slightly. You are my reason for being. Despite the moments of despair, there were also moments of hope. Teresa would smile when Matthew told her silly jokes, and her eyes would light up when they talked about plans for the future, even though they knew time was limited. That night, Matthew sat by Teresa's side, his hand gently stroking her hair. I love you very much, Teresa. I will always be with you, no matter what happens. Teresa smiled faintly, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. I love you too, Matthew. Thank you for everything. Amidst the cold atmosphere of the hospital, the love and connection between Matthew and Teresa shone with a warmth that nothing could extinguish. Teresa's last days were a slow decline. Her body, increasingly weak, reflected the wear and tear of the illness, but her spirit remained unbroken. Sitting in her hospital bed, Teresa knew her time was running out. She decided to write a letter to Matthew, a farewell that contained everything her heart wanted to express. With trembling hands, she took a piece of paper and a pen. The letter started with difficulty, but her thoughts flowed with each word. Dear Matthew, I don't know how to start this letter, but I feel it's important to tell you what I've been keeping in my heart. When you came into my life, everything changed for the better. You gave me hope when I needed it most, and I can never thank you enough for that. You have been more than a friend, more than a father. You have been my hero, my strength. The days we have shared are the happiest I have ever known. From flying kites in the park to baking cookies in the kitchen, every moment has been a treasure. I know my time here is coming to an end, but I want you to know that I am not afraid. You have taught me to be brave, to face each day with a smile. Although I will not be physically here, I will always be with you in spirit. You are the best person I have ever met, and I feel blessed to have had you in my life. Please, don't be sad for me. Remember the good times and keep going with the same strength and love that you have given me. With all my love, Teresa." Carefully folding the paper, she placed it under her pillow. She knew Matthew would find it when the time was right. That night, Matthew sat beside Teresa, holding her hand. The room was silent, only the soft beeping of the monitors breaking the stillness. Matthew was reading aloud, his calm tone filling the space with a serene peace. "Matthew," Teresa whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here, Teresa. What do you need?" he asked, leaning closer to her. "I want you to know that I love you very much." "Thank you for everything," Teresa said, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "And I love you too, Teresa. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me," Matthew replied, his voice breaking slightly. Teresa closed her eyes, her breathing becoming shallower. Matthew felt a lump in his throat as he watched her, knowing the end was near. He held her hand tightly, conveying all his love and support in that gesture. "I'm here with you, Teresa. You are not alone," he whispered, his words a murmur of comfort. In the stillness of the night, Teresa breathed her last, her face relaxed in a final peace. Matthew sat still, the room shrouded in an absolute silence. His tears fell softly, a silent tribute to the love and connection they had shared. Time seemed to stand still. Matthew remained by Teresa's side, his hand still intertwined with hers, his heart filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. He had lost someone very special, but he also knew that the moments they had shared were a gift he would carry with him forever. Upon finding Teresa's letter under her pillow, Matthew read it with tears in his eyes. Each word resonated in his heart, a confirmation of the depth of their bond and the impact they had had on each other. The day of Teresa's funeral was cloudy and somber, a fitting reflection of Matthew's emotional state. The small church in Toledo was filled with respectful silence, broken only by the soft sobs of those in attendance. Matthew, his shoulders slumped and his gaze lost, stood by the grave, feeling that a part of him had gone with her. After the burial, Matthew decided that he had to do something meaningful with the time he had left. The idea came to him one night as he gazed at the stars from his window. He remembered the conversations with Teresa about the future and the dreams she would never be able to fulfill. He decided that his legacy would not only be his pain, but also hope and help for other children who, like Teresa, deserved love and care in their final days. Matthew began the process of donating his entire fortune to various orphanages in Madrid and Toledo. He visited each location personally, making sure that his money would be used in ways that would truly benefit the children. Each visit was a mixture of pain and satisfaction. Pain for what he had lost, and satisfaction for what he could offer. While completing the paperwork for the donations, Matthew found himself reflecting on the events of the past few months. He remembered the moment when the sudden pain had taken him to the hospital, the devastating diagnosis, and the overwhelming fear he felt when they told him he only had 12 months to live. That moment was the beginning of a journey he could never have anticipated. After that terrible news came the anguish of watching Natalia, his wife, pack her things and leave. The sound of her suitcase closing still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the fragility of human relationships. Natalia had been his companion, his support, and seeing her go left him with a deep wound that still ached. Yet, in the midst of all that darkness, Teresa arrived. At first, Matthew didn't know if he had the strength to care for someone else, especially a child who was also facing her own battle against time. Caring for Teresa had filled a void in his life that he never knew existed. Every moment with her, from the small conversations to the games in the park, gave Matthew a purpose he had never experienced before. Teresa's laughter, her innocence, and her ability to find joy in the simplest things made Matthew feel that their time together, though brief, had been profoundly meaningful. Now, in his final days, Matthew found comfort in knowing he had done everything he could to leave a positive impact. He had not only provided love and care for Teresa, but he was also ensuring a brighter future for other children in need. Each signature on the donation documents was a step towards fulfilling his legacy. Matthew's nights were filled with dreams of a future he would not see, but one he knew he had helped build. He pictured the children in the orphanages growing up, finding love and opportunities thanks to his donations. That vision gave him peace. Matthew knew his time was also running out. His health was deteriorating rapidly, and each day it became more difficult to get out of bed. But the memory of Teresa and the love they shared gave him the strength to carry on. He spent his days writing letters, sharing his experiences and the wisdom he had gained through his journey with Teresa. One afternoon, as Matthew wrote one of his final letters, he paused to reflect. He thought deeply about the moments they had shared, the laughter and the tears, and how, despite all the challenges they faced, they had managed to find a way to be happy together. The memories of their time spent together were his true legacy, something that no amount of time or illness could ever take away from him. Each passing day seemed to move slower, with every new day presenting more difficulties than the last. Matthew continued to write, each word serving as both a farewell and a thank you to those who had touched his life in profound ways. He knew that these letters would provide comfort and solace to his friends and loved ones after he was gone. One morning, Matthew awoke with a profound sense of peace. He was acutely aware that the end was near. He called his dear friend Pablo and asked him to come over as soon as possible. When Pablo arrived, Matthew looked at him with eyes brimming with affection and gratitude. "Pablo, I want you to know how much I value your friendship. You have been like a brother to me." Pablo, visibly moved and with his voice breaking, replied, "And you to me, Matthew. I promise everything will be done as you wish." The bond between them was palpable, a testament to the enduring power of friendship and love, even in the face of life's greatest challenges. Matthew felt a sense of reassurance, knowing that his wishes would be honored, and that his legacy would live on through the memories and love of those he held dear. That night, Matthew drifted off to sleep, never to wake again. His passing was peaceful, surrounded by the love and memories he had created with Teresa and his friends. Pablo took care of all the arrangements, fulfilling Matthew's last wishes. On the day of the funeral, Matthew was laid to rest next to Teresa, their graves marked by a shared headstone that read, "United in life and death, their love endures eternally." Fresh flowers adorned the site, a symbol of the love and legacy they left behind. Pablo stood by their graves, his heart heavy with sadness, but also with a deep peace. He knew that Matthew and Teresa were together in a better place, free from the pain and illness they had endured. In time, Pablo continued to visit his friend's resting place regularly. Each visit was a time for reflection and gratitude, an opportunity to remember the lessons of love and courage that Matthew and Teresa had taught him. Matthew's legacy was not just his love for Teresa, but also the hope and strength they had shared with those who knew them. Although their lives were brief, their impact was profound, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of those who were lucky enough to have known them. This story reminds us that, although life is full of challenges, there is always hope for those who persevere with faith and determination. Remember, as this story teaches us, God always blesses good people. Everything happens for a reason, and even if we don't understand the reasons behind our difficulties, we must trust that happiness will come into our lives if we keep our faith and keep moving forward. The story also shows us the importance of being kind and supportive to those around us. The encouragement and belief made a significant difference. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. That way, you can get notifications of more inspiring and touching stories that will surely move your hearts. Each story I share is a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the power of hope and faith.